Hi, welcome to AV Reacts, where we talk with a group of experts about the things that we see going on in the world and in pop culture. And we do all of that from an AV perspective. I'm your host, Leon Prather, and with me today are several guests, but this is a very special episode, not just because of our guests, but because it's the scariest time of the year. Not Halloween, but the time of the year where we get together in October, at least in 2023, to talk about spooky stories of peril and woe related to AV installs. That's right, this is the AV Install Nightmare episode of AV Reacts. And so with me, we've got Elizabeth Burnham, we've got Gerald Stevens, and Ivan Schwartz. And some of those guests actually have a pretty close tie to the very thing that has inspired this episode, which is a Facebook group called AV Install Nightmares. And so I'm going to go ahead and throw to Elizabeth. How are you doing today?
Good. Just a typical Wednesday at Avixa, you know?
Yeah. So if you are listening audio only, you may not be able to see this, but Elizabeth has come fully decked out and ready for this spooky episode, dressed to the nines in Wednesday Addams garb. And so we appreciate that.
Every day is Halloween for me.
And Elizabeth, can you actually tell us how long you've been in the industry and what you do today?
Yeah, so I've been in the industry about 12 years, and I'm a staff instructor here at Avixa.
Awesome. Let's go ahead and throw to our other esteemed guests who are very closely tied to the AV Install Nightmares group, and that is Gerald Stevens, the founder of the group, and also Ivan Schwartz. Gerald and Ivan, how are you?
Doing great. Well,
good to hear. Can you both tell us how long you've been in the industry and what you do today? I'll start with Gerald.
Oh, gosh. Professionally, probably since about 1987. Started as a musician, then working in a music store, and then started doing installations, and then I became a rep for a while. And in 2000, I became a consultant. And so now I'm a audio video design consultant since.
Gotcha. Yeah, everyone in AV, generally speaking, goes through a lot of different kind of walks of life throughout the industry. Ivan, can you do the same?
Sure. I started very early teen years working for a contractor, and got, of course, into live sound with bands, as you do in high school, and worked with a lot of different groups, did a lot of live sound, ended up getting into the industry officially with manufacturer, more on the touring side of things, and then that moved towards commercial over, I'd say, the past 20 years. But I've been involved in product development and sales, and my current capacity, I'm director of consultant relations. So I basically am the interface with the consultant and design community for a manufacturer.
Well, thank you. So the AV Installed Nightmares group on Facebook is one that is very popular at Avixa, actually. A lot of employees have found it. We get a lot of amusement from it. The group is described on Facebook as simply being a group where AV professionals can share their installation nightmares. And so we're going to be doing a lot of that today. But before we get to that, would love for Gerald, Ivan, if you could go ahead and tell us what inspired you to make the group. And Ivan, I know you're a moderator in the group, and what you like about it. So I'll start with you, Gerald.
Oh, well, I was working on a very large project in Dubai about 2009, and I was doing work inspections. We had designed all of the AV systems in the project, and was getting very frustrated at the things that I saw in the project. Of course, I would take pictures as I was doing my reports and submit pictures with the reports. And one day I got so frustrated that I thought, well, you know, I just joined this new Facebook thing. Maybe I'll just share some of my pain. So I started the group, posted a few pictures, sent out invitations to a few friends. I think Ivan might have been one of the first ones. And the group just kind of took off.
Yeah, so Yeah, so Ivan, you were one of the first to be invited into the group, and once you got into it, how much did it take off? I think you were alluding one day recently about how many people are in there now.
Yeah, a little over 83,000 now, which, for the first while, it was up to a few thousand. That's kind of what we expected. But then you got more and more people, both Resi AV installers, but also kind of IT people and even electricians and such, just wanting to get in on it. And it's become just a huge group. Yeah, that too. So it's interesting because there are a lot of wiring and electrician fail groups and things like that. But this is kind of this common point for a bunch of different people in different trades to share their horror stories and photos.
Yeah, it really is funny how you give everyone a chance to share their pain, and you find out how many of us are all in the same boat, no matter where we're all coming from. You've got people who I'm sure are new in the industry, like some of our listeners might be, or people who have been veterans in the industry, again, like some of our listeners might be, and everyone can kind of relate. And one of the things that I like, and I'm curious if Elizabeth feels the same, especially being a staff instructor, is that some of these stories that we see, they're hilarious. And a lot of times, we're going to shake our heads and nod our head and say, oh my gosh, I understand you. I feel your pain. But there's also the side benefit that you kind of get to see what not to do. There is a bit of learning that you can do with that. And hopefully maybe the stories we share today, people can learn from our examples and not maybe go through the things that we did. That sound about right, Elizabeth?
That's exactly. I was going to say, with 83,000 members, it kind of really portrays how important education in our industry is, because, a lot of people have come to that page probably because they've had something they've wanted to share, which means there's been possibly 83,000 instances of a failure.
Yeah. For sure. And I'm sure there are more that we've never seen or we've never heard. I'm going to go ahead and plug
the ones you don't share.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and plug the group right now. If you've not heard about it before this moment and you're interested in AV, obviously, otherwise, why would you be here? Definitely check it out. You will have a lot of entertainment, but you can also learn quite a bit. So let's go ahead and move into the segment that I'd like to call the spooky stories around the fire segment. So Wednesday, Ivan, Gerald, what we're going to do is we're going to share, each one of us is going to share a brief story of our own personal AV nightmares. Might be one that you've experienced or one that you know about. We're not going to, name too many names or anything, but we're also going to gamify this a bit. So not only are we going to share, we're going to try to outspook each other. So after each story, we're going to give each story a scare rating. Now the ratings are going to be between 1 to 5. There's no zeros. Everyone gets points. So don't worry, you will get at least a 1. So we'll each go around the room, and we will give our own ratings to each story that we give. Does that sound fine?
Well, I am the oldest, so I should get the highest ratings.
I mean, you are the father of the group, and you're definitely the patriarch of the group. So you automatically win. So it's really not a competition. It's like, whose line is it anyway, where everything's made up and the points don't matter. Right. I'll actually start. I've got a story from an old installation where there was a lot of money involved in the installation. As I think we all know, sometimes there's a lot of money that goes into these installs. And in this particular one, we had a lot of wire that had to go to a lot of different places. And so there was an interactive theater, one of 3 interactive theaters in this space, and there were about 10 displays that had to be powered. They had to have some kind of video feed, and they were all high definition for the time. And so a lot of cable had to be run to those things around this room. And so when we're doing that, well, not me, but when those who were installing it were doing so, nobody stopped to ask the why certain things were done the way that they were. And then you fast forward a few years to when I'm working there, and I'm new to the company, new in my role. And every time that we had a lightning storm, I had to go run to that theater every single time because we'd have issues. What issues? Well, we had these video extender boxes, some old VGA extenders. If you can, I'm now dating how old this story is. We had these VGA extender boxes that were powered over Ethernet, or the signal was sent over Ethernet. And every single time that we had lightning storms, those things would short out. Nothing else would short out, but they would short out on either end. They would die, and we'd have to replace them. And finally, we realized that the reason why that was because all of the cable for those was run underground. We did know that, but it was not the right situation. It wasn't the right scenario. So it was in PVC within, I think, a concrete foundation. But lightning goes where it wants, I suppose. And I think about 3 or 4 years later, at one point we were replacing a lot of things in that theater, and I went in and snaked the conduit and found that the whole conduit had been filled with water. But the thing was, the conduit wasn't cracked. There was no groundwater leaching in. It was all condensation from inside the building, from AC, from a lot of years. So it was filled with water. Very gross water, by the way. The cable was not rated for what it was that we were doing, and sure enough, every single time we had lightning strikes, that could cost upwards of $4,000 to $20-some thousand, depending on what went wrong on either end. So that one's my nightmare. I'm going to ask for a rating. 1 to 5?
3.
Okay.
Yeah, I think three's fair.
3's about right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Gerald, since you founded the group and you were the first to give a rating, I'd love to hear your story.
Oh, well, this same project that inspired me to start the group, one of the requirements on the contractor was to provide test reports of each of the systems in each of the rooms, one of which was loudspeaker line impedance measurements to ensure that we weren't getting too much line loss. And I got curious because they would send me these test reports, but they didn't include the impedance measurements. And so finally I had to put my foot down and say, look, I'm not taking any more test reports until you get me those measurements. So a few days later, they send me another batch of reports for 4 or 5 different rooms. And they had done the measurements, but it was clear that they were not impedance measurements, they were resistance measurements. So I called the head engineer for the contractor in, and I said, these are not impedance measurements. How did you do these measurements? He said, well, we took a multimeter and checked it, and it's like, yeah, that's not the same thing. And I ended up, he said, I don't know what it is. And I had a little, WT some or another woofer tester kit for USB dongle. So I gave that to him in the software, showed him how to use it, sent him on his way. And it just, it just hit me that this was the head engineer on a $30 million project who didn't understand what loudspeaker impedance line measurements were. And this was who was installing our system. And it just added to my frustration. And funny enough, about 3 weeks later, they sent me a report for another room. And they had done the measurements that had surface-mounted loudspeakers that they were supposed to add transformers. And they put on their shop drawings, they added transformers. And so when I looked at their measurements, they were like 1.5 ohms per circuit. And I said, you didn't put the transformers in, did you? And he kind of shrunk. He said, no. So it just hit me how hard it is, how important it is for education. How many people out there are doing these jobs that don't understand principles as fundamental as impedance versus resistance?
Yeah, there's the idea of not knowing what you know or not knowing what you don't know, I suppose. But if there's one thing that anyone who's listening to this can take from this, the AV community is an incredibly supportive community. So you're not, no one expects that you know everything. However, when it comes to the job, it's going to be expected that it's done right. And so it's absolutely fine to reach out. So I think that's definitely a moral to take away from that story. And that's, again, a really expensive project where, we still see those things on the small and the big. So, all right, group, let's give this one a rating. Scary rating, 1 to 5.
I'm going to go between 4 and 5. I mean, that's pretty bad about the Transformers.
Yeah, we'll give it a 4 at least.
Yes, definitely a 4. 4.5.
Yeah, I'm gonna go Olympic style. I'm gonna say 4.2. We're gonna get into really strange 10th increments, where then you have to wonder, like, how did you get the 0.2? Like, what could I have done to get a 4.3? Is there a scale? Is it just at your own whim? Elizabeth, Ivan, who wants to go next?
I'll jump in.
Okay, we'll go with Ivan.
So it's funny because on the group, they do kind of break into user error, user just not knowing, things being done completely improperly, broken equipment, whatever. This one is a whole different category from all of that. So many years ago, I worked for a major loudspeaker manufacturer, and I got a call from a customer. And he said, hey, I'm having problems with these speakers that I installed. I installed them about a year ago, and getting intermittent operation, and they kind of sound funny. And so we talked for a bit and kind of narrowed it down to the fact that it's a two-way cabinet, 15-inch low-frequency drivers, and it's definitely all centered around the 15s. And I think it was 3 or 4 of them that were having problems. And so I said, well, send them in. We'll get them into service, still under warranty, and check them out. And so I didn't think anything else of it. And probably about a week and a half, 2 weeks later, I get a call from service, which is in the same building. And we did our own recones and all that stuff. And they said, yeah, can you come back here and take a look at something? And I'm like, okay. And so wander all the way in back. And service department has all these recone stations. And the woman who called me is standing at hers and says, come on over. And when I come over, she lifts the magnet cover, just a cast aluminum piece, off the back of the speaker driver itself. And little tiny ants just start going everywhere, all across the bench and everything. They're like sweeping them back towards the speaker. And every one of these drivers was just loaded. And you got to remember, these were shipped there. So this whole little colony in each one was still alive and was just loaded in there. And then when they finally killed the ants and got them all cleaned up, it turns out the ants ate through the spider, got down into the gap of the magnet gap where the voice coil is, and there were so many of them, they'd get stuck in there and impede the motion of the voice coil. And so it kind of literally a creepy story, but this is what happens when nature and AV equipment don't necessarily get along well together.
That's for sure a 10.
That's a creepy one. I'll give that a 4 simply because it's creepy with ants. Ooh.
Yes. Yeah. Anything with...
It's beyond the typical bird nest in the horn, which is a common one.
Yes, definitely giving that a 5.
There's so many puns in these stories right now. So bird nest in the horn, I'm thinking bird in the tweeter. You mentioned an ant is eating a spider. I've got to say it. Sorry, I'm not even a dad, but here's the dad joke. I guess someone called to say, man, the speaker's really bugging me. And then you had to be like, yeah, no, I get it. Sorry. Sorry. Our producers might edit that one out. That is so on brand for the theme that I've got to give that like a 4 or 5 on that. 4.5 for sure. I can't, it makes my skin crawl. I honestly thinking about it. I'm not even afraid of ants. I don't have any bug fears, but if a giant colony of them came out of a speaker I was working on, I would then have a fear of them.
And you said I've had multiple speakers, not just one speaker, right?
Right.
Yeah, multiple. Definitely 5. That's
it is the last thing you're expecting, because you walk up to this very clean bench with all these chemicals and things on it, and pop that cap off, and everything starts running and things are moving.
Now, what was there? What was their reaction? I'm wondering. What's their response when you told them about it?
It was, as I remember, no surprise here, it was in Florida. And it was like, oh, yeah, we have a problem with that. I don't think they were particularly surprised. But I believe they did take some steps to keep ants away from living in the speakers, which is always a bad thing.
That's hilarious. You tell them about this and they're going, sounds about right.
Yeah.
I could have guessed that. If there are any Florida listeners, would love to hear whether or not this is part of your actual everyday life. And if so, I don't think I'll be moving there. Elizabeth, you got a story for us?
Yes. So mine takes place in Monterrey, Mexico, and it centers around site conditions, which I know a lot of people probably have these same similar nightmare experiences. But to set the scene, this took place on a government installation. So, there's already going to be lots of restrictions on what you can and can't do. And this project involved myself and another AV engineer he's a fantastic AV engineer, by the way. So I was down there as a control systems programmer, and he was down there as the audio DSP programmer, and we were subcontracted under a data company. So when we went down there, this project, by the way, had taken place over 2 years. So between when the equipment was shipped and installed by the data contractor, now it was 2 years later where we actually went down to commission it. Mm-hmm. And once we made it down there, both of us ran into small issues. My control system had an issue with firmware, obviously, because it was 2 years later. That was resolved pretty quickly. But the DSP issue, so the audio, this particular system was an audio teller paging system. So it was all microphones, speakers, and a small keypad. And we were starting to get random pops in the audio line, and we needed to troubleshoot it. But in order to troubleshoot anything, once you went through all of your basic steps, you had to go to the manufacturer, right? And since we're on a government facility, there were no cell phones. So in order to troubleshoot this, we had to, kind of collect all the information. Then you'd have to do a half-mile hike up to the communications trailer where there was a landline you could call the manufacturer from. So you had to leave the secured site, check all your stuff with security, leave the secure site, walk half a mile up to the trailer, use the landline phone to call the manufacturer. So obviously, you sit on hold, get your manufacturer, go through all of your troubleshooting steps. Then we would have to take notes and write down all of the things we needed to troubleshoot. Then you had to walk a quarter mile back to the secured site, check everything through the metal detector, do all of your bag searches again, go to the site where we were testing this issue with the audio DSP, test everything, and then report back by doing all those steps again to the manufacturer. If it solved it, great, but it didn't solve it. After about 3 days, we had to do this repeatedly for 3 days. So at that point, we thought that potentially, because there were about 10 audio DSPs in the system, we thought that maybe one of them had failed. It'd been sitting there for 2 years. So then we started to have to come up with all these scenarios of how do we get something there quickly, because we only have 4 weeks to commission this system. So now we're like, okay, we're going to drive across the border to Texas, and we're going to have something drop shipped to some random post office. And then we're going to drive it back so we can get it through customs, because if you try to ship it, it's going to be held up in customs, and then we can't get the job completed. So we came up with all these scenarios about how we were going to have to cross into, back into Texas and Mexico. Turns out, finally, the resolution was that while the DSPs had airflow between them, they had one rack RU between them, that was still not enough, and they were still generating too much heat in this site because it was also a very, warm area, and there wasn't full air conditioning throughout the building. So we separated the units a little bit more within the rack and gave them a couple more RUs, and that seemed to resolve the issue. So the nightmare part is the troubleshooting and what we were going to do to solve it. Ultimately, the resolution was actually a simple one, and everyone was happy.
I'll give it a 5 just because you had to walk back and forth and through security so many times.
Right, and check your laptop every time. They had to check and make sure your camera was off, all of the typical, anyone who's worked on a government facility knows that it's challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure which part of that is the worst part of the nightmare, but I thought the logistics of that were actually the part that's like, I don't want to deal with that. I really don't. But you do what you gotta do. Yeah, I'm gonna put that up there. Sticking with my Olympic style, we'll go 4.8. What about
I'll
you,
round
Ivan?
up and call it a 5. I've worked in some government projects, and that's even worse than what I had to deal with. So I feel your pain.
Well, you've topped our stories. I'm not sure, but I think, Elizabeth, you win. I think you win. I don't know. The points don't actually matter, so I don't remember what the scores were. So rewind this back if you're listening to see if I'm wrong, and you can tell us later. But I think, Elizabeth, you won. I think your
Is there
average
a
was
prize?
4.9 or something like that.
Is there a prize for winning?
Yes, there is a talk with Noreen, our producer, later, and he will get right on that. Actually, get right on that prize. So, sorry, Noreen, that's what happens when I get a microphone. People get voluntold. I think let's actually pause here for a second and think about some of these stories that we just heard. If there's something people should take from these, these are learning moments a little bit. These are kind of teachable moments. I'll actually start with Elizabeth's story. Is there anything that you feel like someone could maybe take from that and say, these are things I maybe could, or what things that you maybe would say, I could have done this and this, and maybe that would have been avoidable? Or is it just one of those where just deal with it?
I think it's a little bit of both. And I have this joke of, I also have a project management certification, and I've done some project management throughout the years. And I always like to tell people, what's your plunger plan? Meaning, like, worst case, like you have something going on and the toilets are overflowing. Like, what's your worst case plunger plan, right? And, going into that project, because it had taken so long, over 2 years, you're also worried about profit margin and everything. So it's hard to kind of have a full-on plunger plan. But I think we both, the other engineer and I, were maybe a little bit naive about, like, the worst case scenario of what if we got down there and a piece of equipment had failed. We had generally talked about it, and there wasn't really a good option at that point, because we didn't want to purchase all this extra equipment and bring it down, because we had to travel with all of our tools. We already had 3 toolboxes we were traveling with. So, you have to get all that through international customs and everything anyway. So we were going down there hoping for the best, which is not always the best way to plan a project. But, you're working within the constraints of profit and a project that's gone on for really, really long time. The one thing that we did do that I thought was really helpful, I was talking about communicating with the manufacturers. We did explain to the manufacturer that we were troubleshooting with what our situation was getting to and from the communications trailer to use the landline. And so that manufacturer did dedicate a help person that we could call directly. So that way, when we did walk up there, we weren't sitting on hold for an hour. So that was one thing that we did once we realized we needed to troubleshoot both my control system and the audio system. We contacted the manufacturer and was like, look, this is what's going on. Can you please just give us a dedicated help person so we can troubleshoot this as quickly as possible? So, I think it's a little bit of site conditions that are out of your control, some site conditions that are within your control, and trying to make the best of what you're dealing with, as a team. And luckily, that person I was working with was a great team member, and we worked really well together.
So I was going to keep going with the learning stories here, but there's something that you said that makes me think of something that Ivan actually shared. So I actually know this story, and you guys don't, but I think, Ivan, if you could share the story, I'll give you the hint on which one it is. The one related to the CEO referral that turns into a church install. This, I think, is a great example of a nightmare where being able to take something in learning, to learn something from this, I think would be great for anyone.
Sure. So, actually, I remember there was another little bit to this. So the company that I worked with at the time, our primary business was pro audio products, but we did sell some loudspeakers into very high-end residential applications. And so my counterpart who dealt with that sort of customer referred him over to me and said, hey, these guys normally do resi, they do a few light commercial projects, and they've got a bigger commercial project now. Can you help them out? Sure. So I get this guy on the phone, so I have no real background with him. And he says, well, we did this big job for a very large corporate CEO, and he was so happy with the work that we did that he wants us to look at their church project, because they were basically wanting to do an entire new sound system at a quite large contemporary Christian facility. And so basically we talked on the phone for a while, and he had already discussed things with this customer and with the church technology team. And he starts asking me all these questions, like, what is a digital mixing console? And what's a monitor console? And what are in-ears? Like, literally has no clue what the term in-ears means. What's a direct box? Because evidently they were taking notes at this meeting, and this is all this stuff he hasn't a clue about. And so at this point, I kind of see the writing on the wall and said, well, you know, I've done a lot of projects with some excellent consultants that work on specifically these types of projects, and they know every little bit about all this. Oh, he even asked about intelligent lighting, which isn't my thing, but, you know, I started very quickly to understand what level project this was, and that this guy had no clue about this market at all. And so I wanted to hook him up with a consultant, and he said, "Oh no, we don't need to get anyone else involved. We can figure all this out." And so I did explain, well, we don't get into digital consoles and all this other stuff, but we do make loudspeakers that are used in these types of projects. And so I steer him towards the website where we show all this stuff, and he's looking at it, and he goes, "Wow, these are really big speakers. How do you install these things?" And so I start talking about making sure you get a mechanical engineer involved and have it, you know, properly suspended, and you use rigging hardware designed for overhead applications, certified hardware. And he interrupts me and says, "Well, where do you buy that stuff? Can I get it at Home Depot?" And this whole thing, it's a train wreck. You're seeing the train going off
It's
the track.
slowly
Very, very. And I said, "No, no, you need to buy it from places that specialize in this. And again, you need to get a mechanical engineer to tell you and certify the drawings that this is going to be safe to suspend from these points in the facility," and blah, blah, blah. And so they kind of went off, and luckily I never heard anything back from them. But, you know, the whole moral of the story is just never underestimate the fact that someone will dive headfirst into something that they know absolutely nothing about. They have none of the skills required to do it. But being the salespeople that they are, they're going to sell that job and say yes, 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 and then figure out how to do it later. So kind of scary when you think about it. And, you know, Gerald and I have seen big installs done improperly before, and it can be really scary because there can be things that happen that are fatal or at the very least dangerous. But,
Sure.
You know, this was one of those few times I got to witness the whole thing in a very short period of time, and just seeing this potential disaster in the making.
About half of the posts on the Nightmares group are probably for exactly that reason.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody jumping into something they know nothing about.
Yeah.
I mean, that ties into Gerald's story, you know. A lot of what he talked about with his nightmare was just a lack of education. And,
Yeah.
you know, I think Avixa has really done a good job, especially in the last 10 years, helping, you know, provide education opportunities and knowledge opportunities. And, you know, I think that would have definitely, because Gerald, when did you say your story was? 2009?
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're getting almost 20 years ago now. So that's been quite a while. And hopefully by now that lead engineer has been much more educated on audio knowledge.
Yeah. It's. Oh no, go ahead, Ivan.
Oh, I was just going to say that it brings up an interesting point, because even though I don't want to admit it, I'm old enough to remember when there was no formal training. You know, I went to some of the earliest SynodCon classes, and that was a godsend at the time. There was just so little information you could trust, and real solid information. You know, growing up more in the rock and roll world, that was all just kind of making your way. But I will say that at least back then, the few people doing rigging really knew what they were doing. You know, the big stadium installs and all that stuff. I knew a lot of the people involved in those projects, and they were, you know, real rigging people that also knew how to suspend air conditioning units and all this other mechanical stuff. And I think some of that's just kind of gone the way of the wind, because a lot of times I'll see things, just people thinking it's okay to buy chain at Home Depot and throw it up in the air, or to wrap a chain or something around a wood beam and just hang from that, you know. And
around the handles on the side of the box.
Yeah, hanging from the handles is a good one too. Yeah, or just taking a hanging fitting and putting it onto a box or an ice screw or something like that. There's just so much more to it that people don't think about, and it is literally scary.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to get into our last segment here in a second. But you're making me think about maybe one of those other big takeaways from everything we're saying is, you know, planning is never a bad thing.
Right.
Planning is always good.
Always a plunger plan.
Always have a plunger plan. Plan even for what's going to happen after that installer leaves. You know, you need the resources and the training to be able to handle the things that you've bought. And we can certainly, as AV professionals, always advise on that, as you attempted to do as well, Ivan. We can always advise on that, and hopefully people will take that to heart. But you know, a friend of mine who also works in technology, not in audiovisual, he's actually a software developer, but he's done a thousand things, had talked to me about this concept of the democratization of technology. And it was such a great way of putting it, that there's this double-edged sword now. You know, Ivan, you're saying there's things that have kind of gone by the wayside. There was a day when it seemed more natural for someone to immediately ask for a professional's assistance on something related to technology. And now today, technology just sounds like something we use out of convenience most of the time. It doesn't evoke the same thoughts in our minds. I think we have computers essentially walking around with us in our pockets. You know, my supervisor the other day was telling us about how her children were making Lego stop motion animation with an app on their phone and a few minutes of their time. And so, you know, one of the things that used to kind of trigger me internally, not externally, never, the client never heard about this, but was 3 words: couldn't you just? Yeah, couldn't you just? That's a hard one. I would get internally upset, but then there's also this idea of saying, what you're asking for, I guarantee you don't know how complex it is. And I'd like you to know, so that you know the cost of what you're asking for, whether it was of me or other people, just so you can appreciate the complexity. In some cases, kind of the beauty, once you stand back and see something that's really well executed, and you realize, wow, you know, a lot really went into that, a lot of hands, a lot of time, and all of that's stuff that you find in our industry for sure, and other trades that are related. So, but Gerald, like you said, a lot of the posts on the AV Nightmares group or AV Install Nightmares group oftentimes may result from perhaps a lack of education or a couple other things that kind of unite them. So what we're going to actually do now is we're going to end our episode today with a segment called Around the Interwebs. We've actually started this elsewhere in our podcast, but this is the AV Nightmare Awards edition of Around the Interwebs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you some curated examples of online nightmare posts from that group. Some of you may already have seen them at some point, but you see so many, you might not remember these. And we will each react. Right now, you've never seen these before. We'll react to each one of these, and we're still going to assign them awards. We've got 3 different awards, and each person can give their own award for each one of these stories. And so we've got the Would Keep Me Up at Night award. This is scaring me.
Oh, Ivan's won that for me. I'm literally going to have nightmares about that tonight, Ivan, with spiders coming out of my audio.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're welcome. Then there is the You Had to Be There award. This is one where maybe we understand it, and we don't even really pass judgment on the scenario. It's like, you had to be there. You do what you had to do. And then the third one is just, I have no words. The I have no words award. So if we are all good with that, I'm going to go ahead and share share my screen here. And if you were listening at home, this will be a little bit different for you, but I'll try to describe these things so that you can still get something out of it. Get the screen share here. All right, we're going to start with one of my actual favorites. This will hopefully make you laugh. And so what we are looking at here is a loudspeaker at some kind of barbecue. I can see a family sitting over here. There's a tent. Looks like it's maybe an overcast day. There might be some rain coming. Just throw that in there. But what's really important is that this loudspeaker has an ice pack on the back of it. And I don't mean an ice pack like what you'd put on your head if you had a headache. I'm talking like you went to a 7-Eleven and you got ice for a barbecue. That was
the person who couldn't cook, so they were asked to bring the ice for sure.
Yeah.
Bag of ice strapped to a speaker. Yeah, that's a new one.
Yeah, I'm looking at this one and my thought immediately goes to, if this is a hot day, there's condensation coming off of this thing. There's electrical wire coming right off the back of where this ice pack is as well. I'm assuming maybe someone was trying to cool off the speaker. That maybe the audio was a little too pumped up by the DJ on this day. But let's go ahead and give it an award. Elizabeth, which one of these?
I want to say number 3, but I don't know. I might have to use it. I'm gonna go with "You Had to Be There" because I want to know why.
Yeah. And to be fair, you can give the same award multiple times. We just have 3 categories of awards, so it's okay.
Okay. But I just want to know why.
Ivan, your award.
Well, for anyone to know that you need to cool it off means that they've run that thing into thermal shutdown. So I think they're running it really hot too, and it's a hot day. I'd normally give it a 4.5, but because the handle's missing, I'm giving it a 5. I mean, this is terrifying.
So between would you keep, it keeps you up at night, you had to be there, or you just have no words, which of those awards would you give to it?
Yeah, this is you had to be there.
Gotcha. I'm in the same where I'm going, you had to be there maybe, but I'm leaning toward I have no words. What about you, Gerald?
I have no words.
I actually share the comments here as well. These are the comments that I found that it just cracked me up. Someone said, yeah, just couldn't handle the heat.
I don't remember seeing that one.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Almost half a year ago.
But then I love that someone asked, yeah, but did it work though?
That's the standard response.
That we need to know. All right, let's go to our next one. Gonna zoom in here. So if you are listening at home, what we're seeing is what looks like a stage, some kind of musical performance. I see a speaker cabinet on the floor with a tripod mic stand and a boom. And the mic on that stand is pointed not at the speaker cabinet, the large, 18-inch speaker cabinet. It is instead pointed at a small JBL, maybe, I'm not sure, a small boom box that's on the top.
Leon, I've actually seen a setup like this multiple times. You know, when you go to public venues and they're not really set up for what they're trying to do. Mm-hmm. I've seen this before, sadly. I'm definitely going to go with I have no words because the fact that it happens multiple times is just, it breaks my heart when I see it too.
Gerald, what about you?
He's back on number 3.
Sounds like I have no words. Yeah.
I don't know. I just got to believe that maybe somebody just didn't have the adapter cable to plug it in directly, and you did what you got to do. You know.
Maybe. How about you, Ivan?
Well, the show went on.
The show went on, yeah.
I have no words. I mean, I remember when you had to build your own interfaces and all that, but you can get a $5 widget on Amazon that'll take care of this. So I have no words.
Well, the folks in the Install Nightmares group did have a couple words, and my favorite was this one here at the top. Boombox purists just want that tone, always chasing it until the day they die.
It's true. You need to get the resonance of the plastic enclosure, and it just doesn't sound right if you take a direct out.
That one is a child of the 80s, I think. I'm picturing the boombox over the head. Like, yep. This is what we need. This is what we need. All right, we've got a few more. Here we go.
Oh,
Ooh.
We are looking at a assortment of installations, and in particular, I'm thinking about this one on the left, where we've got a television being installed on a wall with an articulating mount, and someone that has placed themselves rather precariously behind the television and in between the television and the wall with a small hand drill. There's no one securing the TV while they're doing this. I'm assuming that they're maybe trying to unscrew it, actually, because it looks like it's already secured. So I guess this person just doesn't know what's going to happen once they finally get those screws out. Ivan, let's start with you.
Yeah, this is, I've got plenty of words, but I have no words. I mean, the lower right, they went through 3 drivers before they found one that could break the display.
That's true.
It's just amazing. Never underestimate the amount of mess you can get into with more power tools.
Yeah.
And by the way, I gave this a title
there are no
with
words.
There are no words, is what you said?
There are no words.
Yeah, I gave this one a title with our production team. I submitted them with some brief captions, and this one was just called The Before, because I don't know what the after is. What about you, Elizabeth?
yeah, definitely gonna go with You Had to Be There. You know, I'm with you. I'm not sure if it's going up or down, but we could also run into the problem of if it's going up, we might drill through the display, which would be, you know, fun for whoever this poor homeowner is.
So I wonder if the person doing this is the homeowner. I have no idea. Their face is obscured, which is probably great.
Yeah.
For me, I have a hard time saying you had to be there, because I look at this and I see that there's actually 2 people in this photo. There's the person you see and the person you don't.
Oh, that's true.
There's someone taking the photo.
Someone took the photo.
No one is helping secure this television. No one is helping hold the weight. So I have words, but they're not good. All right, let's move on to our next. I think there's 2 more. This is actually maybe my favorite.
No.
I think I remember seeing this one.
This
Yeah.
one's definitely keeping me up at night, Leon.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
This is that.
Yeah, so for viewers or listeners at home, we've got another television install. I'll use that term lightly here. We've got a mounting bracket that is attached directly to the wall and then is being held up completely, or excuse me, the television is being held completely by two bolts that are not actually screwed into the mount. And they're hanging on the heads of those screws. I can't even imagine how much weight is hanging on this.
Yep, definitely keeping me up at night.
Well, and you can actually see, so where they're screwed in looks like the Visa mounting points, and the plastic's forming there.
That's true, yeah.
Oh, this is painful. Yeah.
Yeah, keep me up at night.
That would keep me up at night. I've been present when something just fell off of a wall. I was standing next to said thing. It almost hit me it almost landed on my feet. Because someone had installed something incorrectly. It wasn't anchored well. It wasn't actually technology, it was furniture. The first thought we had after "Leon, are you okay?" was, "Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that the television's okay." And then also, I love that on Facebook, someone put this Goofy and Goofy and Mickey Mouse meme where they're all tiptoeing away from it. Everybody in the place is just tiptoeing. You know, don't want to sneeze or else that TV's going to fall.
Right.
All right, and that I think is going to take us to our last one of the day. I'll zoom in here. We've got a drop ceiling that has a projector installed in it some way, and this is a little bit hard to describe here, but the projector mount, the pole, is not going into the drop ceiling. Doesn't look like it's being secured to anything above the drop ceiling. It looks like it's on essentially the track between tiles, and there's a lot of tape. There's a lot of masking tape. What are actually binder clips?
There's binder clip.
Yeah.
You know, that clamp on the rail there is used for, I've seen those there. It's used for like hanging posters and stuff. Yeah. Not projectors. Definitely not projector.
Yeah. It's a relatively small one, but Yeah.
It's a little stamp metal thing that just slides on.
I mean, we also see the cables coming far away or going far away from the projector itself.
As they say, there's a lot to process here. Is that an X? It looks like someone put an X on that tile. Here, you should drill the hole here.
Which begs the question that maybe someone was trying to give someone a hint. This is where the mounting pole goes.
I can't. Is that rope or is that the electrical cord that they're using to suspend with the
you're
painter
right.
clips?
That's actually
Is that the power cord?
Yeah, it is actually. It's a little bit low res through our screen share here, but that is the electrical cord. Yeah.
And it's wrapped around it so that they can tilt the rear up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow. That's keeping me up at night, Leon. I would have nightmares about that also. Just crashing down on anybody's head underneath.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, for context, before we continue with the awards, now the person that posted this made sure to say, I'm going to read this out loud for anyone that's reading or listening at home. This post isn't for shame necessarily. A teacher did not have a display for over a year in a large metropolitan school district and could not get one from the county. We installed an interactive panel today. I did ask if I could take a picture because I knew of some people who might enjoy this picture. By the way, I like this group not necessarily for poking fun at previous installs, but for the ingenuity unqualified people have. Besides, there's probably electrical and plumbing install nightmares groups that have pictures from my previous residents and their group.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I was a former educator. I was a middle school and high school band director before I got into AV, and I can definitely attest to the stories. I didn't take pictures, but I have plenty of those stories just like that from just the technology that I was expected to use and how it was implemented. It's pretty terrible.
Yeah, for me, it's a mix of you had to be there. It's sad, but then still, it would keep me up at night. Gerald
I
and
went
Ivan.
to that school because I remember that ceiling and those lighting fixtures.
But Gerald, did they have projectors when you were in school?
No, they did not. They had overhead projectors.
Yeah.
Right. With the dry erase marker.
Yes.
I'm not ashamed to say that I was one of those AV kids who'd roll the card in.
I did too, because I wanted to load up the film on the film projectors. Right. And so I did that when I was in junior high.
Yep.
So this started at a young age for both of you.
Well, that takes us to the end there. We've gone through and we've given a lot of awards. We've done our spooky story sharing. We've had some laughs, I think, during this time. Hopefully, if you're listening, what you're taking from this is also, I feel seen. I feel heard. You guys get me. We definitely do. So if you have not joined that AV Install Nightmares group, definitely check it out. Send in the request to join. And we're sitting here with some of the folks who have made that thing go for so long. And so really appreciate what you guys have done, Ivan and Gerald, keeping that going. Community is really important, I think, for everyone in every walk of life and every industry, and even in AV, there's no difference there. So I think without further ado, I'm just going to say thank you to everyone who has joined us for this edition of AV Reacts, the AV Install Nightmares episode. And for anyone that is listening at home, if you want to catch more AV Reacts, you can find us on all of the important podcast platforms. And you can also find us on avixa.tv as well. And stay tuned for our next episode. Deuces.